Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 19 in Make a Game, a cool series on making a video game in Unity. So in today's video we're going to continue where we left off last time by making some enemies. And I've made a list of what we're going to go over today. I hope that we can do most of this stuff. We might not be able to do all of it, so I might have to split this up into several episodes, but we'll have to see with that. We'll just go as quickly as we can. So first off, we're going to add some velocity to our player whenever we jump on the enemy's head. So just like in Mario, we will jump back up again. Then we're going to add some particles whenever the enemy dies. We're going to be doing a bit of restructuring in the way that we have things set up right now. For example, I would like the game manager to manage the level restarting and all that, instead of having that function inside of the ball health script. Then we're also going to kill the player whenever he doesn't manage to jump on top of the enemy, so when he collides with the sides. And we're going to fix some bugs. Most prominently, we're going to do something with moving our camera update script into a late update function instead. And I'm going to show you what that does. Cool. So that is the list of things that we're going to do today. And then in a future video, we're going to add a cool model. Again, Samin Iben is going to take care of making that. And we're also going to add some animations to that model. Cool. So let's get started with the first point here, adding velocity to our player. As always, if you have any questions throughout this video or something that just won't work, you can just head over to forum.brackeys.com, and I, among many other developers, are just ready to answer your questions there. I mean, I very rarely see a thread go unanswered. Cool. So let's move into Unity. As you can see, the scene is exactly as we left it off the last time. I've just gone ahead and moved the checkpoint over a bit because before it was right above our enemy, and so when I died I kept falling on top of the enemy. So I'm simply going to move it over here just to where we start in the beginning. Cool. So what I'm going to do here is first off we need to have a look at how our enemies is currently set up. So we have these this trigger box down here, which takes care of the killing of our player, and we have this trigger box up here, which takes care of the enemy dying. So that's called the hitbox, and the other one is called the kill box. As you can see, the hitbox currently has a script called die on hit, and if we open that up, it simply calls a function on the enemy called die, and that takes care of the enemy dying. But what we want to do here is whenever our enemy dies, we want to also have some kind of access to our player so that we can apply some kind of upwards force to him. Because right now, if we have a look at our enemy script, right here, that is on the enemy center, then you can see that we are currently just destroying the game object. We don't have any reference to our actual player inside of this. So what we can do is we can simply make a variable for that. So we can make a var player, and we can make it of type transform or game object. That's up to you. I'm simply going to make it of type transform. And then inside of this function, we can simply type player dot Rigidbody. Actually, let's make this variable up here of type Rigidbody, so we don't even have to access the Rigidbody down here. Because the way we apply forces in Unity is using the Rigidbody component, which, if you remember, is what makes this act as a physics object in game. And then we can access different functions and parameters inside of this Rigidbody by doing the dot. And you can see that we can add some force. We can and that force you can tweak quite a bit. We can add torque for rotational force, and then we have a bunch of different parameters. We could add a force here, but what adding a force means is that you are applying basically a push in a direction. But if you're already traveling with a certain velocity in the opposite direction, the force won't be too visible. And that's basically what we're doing here, because the ball is going to be falling down. So it's going to be falling with a certain velocity on the y-axis. And once we add the force, we basically have to compete with that already ongoing velocity. So we have to tweak our force, we have to kind of tweak our force to such a degree that we can kind of predict with what force we're coming in, and then apply maybe double that in the other direction. But if we then fall from a very high point and we come in with a lot of force, it might not act as we want it to. So what we're going to do instead is we're simply going to directly change the velocity that our ball is moving at. So to do that, we do Rigidbody.velocity, and then we access the y component .y. And you can just do it like this in JavaScript. It's a little bit more tricky in C#, but it's really not that hard either. And we can equal this to whatever value we want. And let's store this value as a variable too, so we can tweak it however we want. So we're going to do a var, and this is going to be called maybe, what are we going to call this? Bounce amount, maybe. And we can equal this to, let's say, 10f by default. I don't really have an understanding of how much this is going to be, but we're simply going to do that and equal it to bounce amount. And now we can save this. We can hit back into Unity and select the enemy center. Now you can see that we can drag a player onto here, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to drag our ball onto that. And what you can see now, that once we jump on top of this is hopefully gonna work. Please work. Oops, I hit it wrong there. As you can see, I still have to tweak the colliders a bit. Oops, this is definitely not working. So we are apparently getting some kind of error, and I don't really know why this is causing us to crash. It looks like my version of Unity simply closed down there. So I'm just gonna check up on this, and I'll see you in one sec. Okay, so I'm back. It looks like the crashing of Unity wasn't actually because of our script, but I can see now that I had apparently forgot to turn Dropbox syncing off. And if you're using Dropbox to sync your projects, you should really remember to do so, because it can mess with the temporary files then that Unity creates along the way. However, we did have an error in our script, and you can see that it throws one here. And it's because if we open up the script here, you can see that we are trying to access a rigid body on the enemy center. We of course need to do player.rigidbody.velocity for this to work. So now when we hit play, again, remember to assign the player, it's very important. You can see that if I jump here, and I really need to learn how to time these, I'm going to try that one more time. So if I jump on top of the box here, you can see that we jump up in the air. So we have that kind of bounce effect that is so cool in the Mario games. And of course you can tweak how much you want the ball to jump as an effect of that. Cool. So that was the first thing on our list. That was adding velocity to our player. One thing I do want to check, however, is that we can maintain this connection to the player even though our player dies for some reason. So if we restart here, you can see that it's very important that our ball is still connected here. And that brings us to the next error. It's one that I found here when messing around with the script here. If we just jump off the edge here right away, you can see that we fall down. And I think the reason why is if we go into our checkpoint script, simply double click it here, you can see that we are making this reached point, and then we are first setting it to something new whenever we actually collide with a checkpoint. So, and by default, when making a variable up here, this is going to be equal to 0,0,0. So vector 3s initiate with a default value of 0.0.0. And if we make an empty object and set the position to 0,0,0, you can see that it puts us right here, which is where we then respawn. So a solution to this is to find your checkpoint like I did here and just move it over. And that's the easiest way, which I showed you before. So I just kind of wanted to show you that. But one thing you can also do is you can set this to a default value of some kind. So we can say that this should equal vector 3. And inside of this, we can then put maybe 0, 2, 0. And that's going to just put us with 2 units up in the air. Pretty sure. See?
Game over.
Yes, indeed it is. So that's completely up to you if that's something you want to do. I'm simply going to put our checkpoint over here and also just leave this as a security measure. Cool. So now that we have our jumping added here, we can remove that from the list and we can go on to maybe the most fun part, I think, which is adding particles whenever our enemy dies. So to make this look more cool, we can also add some sounds in the future, but I think that comes with a model and animation and all that. So for now, we're simply going to do some graphics. And this particle system here, we are going to create from scratch. So let's go under Game Object, Particle System. You can see that adds run right in. Let's drag this under Enemy Center, then reset the transform just so we can see how this looks over here. And then drag it out again because we don't want it to be a child of the enemy center. And then what we can do is we can maybe move this up a bit. So actually, let's not rotate this. Let's instead change the emission in here and the shape in here. So I don't want this to emit in a cone. Currently, you can see it's going out in this cone kind of shape. Instead, let's try out with a sphere. So it just goes in all directions. Or you can maybe do a hemisphere. As you can see, it's just like this half circle that we've extended out. Now we can rotate this. So it goes upwards. Looks better. And actually, I'm just going to go with the sphere. I think that's going to be just fine. And what we're going to do is you can make this emit from shell, but I think that this emitting from any direction is fine. I'm, however, going to make this a smaller point. Something like that. And then we can have, you can put on random direction. I think this is going to look just fine. We are, however, going to change the emission rate. So we're going to put that to 0 and then instead do a bursting system. So we're going to add a burst here and we're going to bump up the amount of particles to maybe something like 60. And I'm going to bump down the duration that this lasts for it to loop faster so we can see it. So I'm going to bump that down to 3. Actually, I'm going to do 2. And then we want to change the lifetime of these particles to something like maybe 1 or 2. I'm just going to do 1. You can see this already looks much better. Then what we can do is we can change the speed from constant to a random between 2 constants. And we can maybe do between, I don't know, 1 and 8. Let's try that. So that it isn't, so it's a bit more randomly scattered is what I'm trying to say. And then we can maybe bump down the size a bit and maybe even make that random as well. So we're going to do a random between 2 constants and we can do 0.2 and actually I'm just going to do 1 here. Looks pretty nice. We can see it from the game view also, how it looks currently. It looks a bit random. Maybe this is a bit too small. We can do 0.5 instead. Yeah, I like that much better. Then we can maybe add a bit of gravity. This is up to you if you want the particles to travel down. I'm actually not too fond of this. Whenever you're doing particle systems like this, it's just a bunch of tweaking. You just need to try out all the different parameters, see what works for you in your particular situation. There's really no rule for making these particle systems look awesome. It's always just a lot of messing around. So, and I of course expect you to go through this much more thoroughly than I do. I just very quickly try to show you what the different parameters does and then you can make something cool out of that. So what we're also going to do is we're going to do color over lifetime and size over lifetime. So first on the size matter here, we are going to make them shrink down over their lifetime by some amount. This looks pretty good, I think. And then color over lifetime, we want the alpha value, which is this up here, to simply just fade out. And I only want that to happen in the last percentage here. So I'm going to put an extra node here so that it only has this short fade out time. Then what we can do is we can change these particles from their current look to an additive look. And that's pretty nice. So we can make a material for them. Actually, we already have this glow particle, so I can just duplicate that and make this into maybe enemy death particle. And then we can select the particle system again. We can go under render and we can drag the enemy death particle in here. And then we can change the color a bit. Maybe we can make this more red. Actually, let's just make this a solid white color, maybe with a bit of alpha transparency. And then inside of the color over lifetime is where we want to really change this. So we can maybe make it start out red. And then we can give it maybe a more yellow color over here. We want it to look pretty cool, kind of like we just collected something that we really want. So just give this rewarding feel to the player. And again, this is not going to be pretty in this video because I have a lot of stuff that I want to show you. So the last thing we could do over here is limit velocity over lifetime. And what this is going to do is really give us that explosion kind of look where it's going to move really fast in the beginning and then dampen, slowly slow down. So we get this sense of it emitting from one point and then just slowing down into space. And to do this, we're going to change the dampen amount down. Or what I think I'm going to leave that at something like 0.24 and then maybe bump up the speed a bit. I think that looks pretty cool actually. We can do a curve when it comes to the speed here to make them kind of slow down, as you can see. And I think that is actually exactly what we want. And then maybe we can change the start speed up here. Instead of doing 8, I want to do maybe 20. So we really get this explosion kind of look. I actually think that looks pretty awesome. And I think we're just going to go with this for now. We can also head back later and change it if we don't like it. So we are simply going to call these enemy death particles. And we'll make them into a prefab by dragging them into the prefabs folder. So we have them here. And remember to turn off looping. That's really important because else it's just going to do several bursts and look really stupid. Excuse me there. Cool. So let's delete that from the scene and instead let's do some instantiation through the script. So let's open up the enemy script. And in the die function, we want to first off have a variable for the particles. So we're going to do var death particles. And these are just going to be of type transform, so we can easily instantiate them. And then right before we destroy the game object, we're simply going to do instantiate. And in here, we're going to do death particles, comma, and then the position, which is just going to be our transform.position, comma, transform.rotation. Save that out, head back into Unity. You can see that we have a slot for death particles. Let's find them in our prefabs folder, drag them in. And now when we hit play, if I can manage to jump on this guy's head, try and time this. Awesome, we have some cool looking particles and it's really that easy and you can just go into this object and tweak it however you want. Cool, so now that we have that in place, we can go ahead and move on to the next part on, or the next bullet point on our list, which is some restructuring. So currently, what I want to do is I want to kill the player through a script. But currently, if we go into the ball and look at the ball health script, we can see that this is actually where we do our level restarting. And I think it's a little weird to have the restarting of the level all happening inside of the ball. So what we are going to do instead is we are going to, follow me here, whoops, that was not on purpose. We're going to go into our game object, or game master script is what I mean, and have a function in here for restarting the level. So inside of our ball health script, we can take our restart level function, just delete that with Control X and copy it over here with Control V. Then we can go in and find our the place where we restart our level, and then instead of simply doing restart level, we're going to do game master dot restart level. But in order for us to access it in here, we need this to be a static function, and that's not really what we are interested in. So what we are going to do instead in here is simply use a GameObject.find statement, and this is going to work just fine. You could also make, actually let's just do that. We'll do a variable up here. So we can call this game master, but do that with a small g, a non-capital G, dot restart level, because what we can then do up here is we can make a variable called game master of type transform. So now we have a reference to that. Actually, let's do of type game object like that. No, let's do of type game master. Sorry if I'm confusing you here, because then we can drag in the script directly. Cool. Then we can copy over the audio clip over here, so we can play some audio from this point. Down here, we don't want the transform.position. Instead, we want to change the position of our player, but I'm going to show you how that's done in a sec. Then what we're also going to do is delete this is restarting from the function there. Go back into our player health script and say that if we are restarting, or if we are not restarting, we are then going to set is restarting to true. And then down here, we're going to set it to false again. Is restarting equals false. This is not by means necessary, but it's good practice. And cool. So what we basically have here is a setup where if we head back into Unity, it's hopefully not going to complain. No. And if we then select our ball, you can see that under our ball health, we have a reference to our game master. So we simply want to drag our GM object into that one, and we are sure that the GM object is always going to be in the scene. And what this will do is it will call the restart level function on the GM object. Then we go back in here. This function is called. This is going to play a sound, which we have right here. It's going to wait for a certain amount of seconds for the sound to finish, and then we want to change the position of our player. But currently we are changing the position of our game master script, and that's not really something we're interested in. So instead, let's establish some kind of connection to our player. And a way to do this is simply create a variable where we then reference the player. So let's start out by doing that. So we're going to make a variable. And I actually want to do that up here because I think it's quite important. And we're going to call this player. And we're going to do of type transform. Now, when we save this, head back into the GM object, you can see that we have a player slot up here. So we want to drag our ball in there. And we want to drag our game over sound, which I can find over here under audio. We want to drag that under the game over sound. Then what we can do in here is instead of saying transform.position, we're simply going to say player.position. Now when we hit play and we jump over here, actually we're not calling the restart function in here, but if we jump down, you can see that our restarting, There's no audio source. Of course, we need to add an audio source on the game master object here. So what we can do is simply go under audio source, and we're going to disable play on awake. Make sure loop is disabled. We can check out maybe the sound setting here. So volume is just set to 1. So we're just going to do the same over here. And we can even set the game over clip just so we know what this audio source is for. We're also doing that inside of the script, but now we have it. So now let's try to play, jump down and see if our restart level function is working. It is, but wow, it freaked out there. For some reason it went totally crazy. I think it might be because we are trying to restart the game multiple times. So to fix this, we're going to have a global variable here, static var, and this is going to be a boolean, and we're going to call this is restarting, and we're going to set this to false by default. And then in here, we're going to say is restarting equals true. And then down here, we're going to set it back to false. I know I just deleted this, but I wanted to show you that we need to make it a static variable, because then inside of the ball health script, we can get rid of all of this. We can get rid of the variable up here. And then instead of saying is restarting, we simply do game master dot is restarting. You could also do with a non-capital G here, because we actually have a reference to the game master. But because this is a static variable, we can also reference it without having a variable for that. That's kind of a hard distinction. Just follow me right now. I know some of this restructuring can be a bit confusing, also because I'm always doing these very clear definitions of the static variable and the public variable, and those things are very separate, but can be very nicely intertwined if you know how they work. So if those still confuse you, just follow me. If not, then well done. You now understand a lot more about the scope of these scripts and what can be accessed and what cannot. So let's try and hit play here again. Let's jump down. Let's see if this works. And indeed it does. You will, however, see that the camera does a little bit of twitching, and that is also on the list here. So you can see that I have this camera laid update that I want to change. We can kill off the restructuring here, I think we're done with that. But right now what happens is inside of our camera, if I open that up, we have a script called camera control. And if we open that up in mono develop, you will see that in our update function, we are setting our position. But if, for instance, we go into our game master script and change the player position through script like this, this might not get to update before the ball is positioned on the screen in its new position. So what happens is that we get this kind of weird twitching effect. So we need to make sure that we update this position here after anything else. So after we've done the ball calculations and all that, then we want to change the position of the camera, and then we want to draw the frame. If we change the position of our camera first, then change the position of our ball, and then draw the frame, our ball will not be in the center of the screen. So to do this, Unity has already made a convenience function for us called late update. And this is exactly the same as the update function, only it is called right after all the other game objects update functions. So once we change that and jump down here, you will see that our weird twitching effect has disappeared. And this will become more apparent when we kill off the ball using the hit box. So now let's remove that. Let's remove fixed box because I think we've done that too. And now it's time for killing off the player. So if we head into the enemy center here, go under kill box, you can see that we currently have no script attached. So let's hit add component, new script, new script, and let's call this kill on hit. And let's double click that to open it up in Mono Develop. And what we're going to do is we're going to delete these two functions and instead make a function on trigger enter as we've done before. Open this up with some brackets. And what we want to do in here is basically to call the restart function, or to call the restart function whenever something hits this. So what we do, maybe we should call this restart on enter. That's up to you. You can always refactor that any way you want to. But what we want to do in here is simply get a reference to the game master script and then call the respawn function. So let's make a reference, call this var, and name it game master, just like we did in the last script. And this is also going to be of type game object. And then we simply do game master dot restart level, like that. And if restart level is not okay, what did we call it? Okay, of course this can be game object. This should be game master, like that. And then we can restart the level, please. Yes, awesome. So under the game master variable that we now have here, we simply drag in the GM object. And we should be able to hit play. So let's try it out. Hit play. Go over here. Try to hit this box. And indeed, we restart. It's really that simple. I'm simply going to turn back on my audio here so I can have a listen and see if the audio is playing here. The music is playing. We roll into our enemy. It says game over and we respawn. So that is basically for everything we can have a fit into one tutorial today. Let's see how long this has been running. Yeah, I might need to split this up. But thanks so much for watching. It's amazing if you made it all the way to the end here. So congrats if you have. And yeah, that's basically all I have to show you. I can't wait till we can do some model implementation and really get some cool looking graphics in here. That's going to be so much fun. So thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next video.